Live from Austin, Texas, this is the Plutopia Happy Hour. Our guest this evening is our good friend and the anti-guru, Bijoy Goswami, who joins us to spread good cheer and knowledge. The not ready for cable news players are here. Susie Sheeler, Maggie Duvall, the anti-whatever I am, Scoop Sweeney, and of course, our Bhagwan himself, John Lebkowski.
Yay.
Hello, John. Did someone steal John?
I'm here.
Okay. I just threw it to you, Bhagwan.
Oh, you threw it to me. Well, I was preoccupied trying to get us set up with our live stream.
That's what I like about this happy hour. We're happy and we're not professional. That is in the rule book. We don't want to come off as a bunch of sellouts.
Right. Elitist.
So, I guess
is it approved that we have beer on set?
Yeah, sure.
Hey,
It's a happy hour after all.
Required.
Well, I told you I had my Chateau Sartre Pinot Noir. And remember,
sure,
their motto is nihilism means nothing to the dancing peasants.
Wow. Wow.
So our guest tonight is Bijoy Goswami. He's part entrepreneur, part philosopher, and what other parts do you have, Bijoy?
Part human.
Are they interchangeable?
Part alien.
The man of meaning. The man of the journey method.
I've got this light streaming down here. Maybe if I could just have it on my head, that would.
Oh,
that would look really good.
Cool.
I just thought it was an abduction or,
Oh my God, somebody screenshot that. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
You could
It's
open
the rapture.
You could open a mega church. You'd be a rich man.
It's been my lifelong dream to run a mega church.
I would probably subscribe to that.
I mean, the call to action is in the name, so that works. Not much explanation needed. Lots of beer, lots of wine. I mean,
I think we have a party platform farming right there.
A party platform to have a party. Works really well.
The other party doesn't have a platform at all other than trust in Trump.
What better platform than the
Dear
party
leader.
platform?
Dear leader.
Well, they're going to
that's
make
kind of an
America
interesting
great.
Interesting thing about the Republican National Convention was that they had no platform.
Except the one
they had a single, I guess, a sort of mono platform, and their platform was whatever Mad King Donald says, we're going to do it.
That platform sounds like the one they used to line up the doomed at the edge of the volcano just before they push them in. That's the only platform that resembles.
It's just fear. It's just fear. Fear is their platform.
Well, so in bringing up the RNC, we should also bring up the fact that Bijoy gave this some thought, and he posted a blog post the other day that explains in the Bijoy way, the steward of meaning way, how Trump has exposed the flaws in the American system.
You got a lot of splaining to do.
That's right. And I am going to post a link to this right now, where the people who are showing up can see it. But Bijoy, you want to talk about that? What are your thoughts about the revelations that we can attribute to the Trump presidency? Take a big swig of that beer.
Yeah. Susie, Maggie, where are your beers or wines? I mean, I feel like we don't have balance here.
I'm watering tonight. It's been a long day. I didn't have time to go out beforehand. So I'll swill water.
I take herbs.
Or
Enough said there.
Yeah,
With a
exactly.
big smile.
that works. Did everybody get a chance to even check out the article, or have you all been just too busy and got into it? I mean,
think
I
we
guess
all read it.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I mean, it was interesting because these thoughts have been fermenting or for some time, and to me, we've had a lot of these conversations. Us all five of us, and all of us independently have had these conversations about what it is, what it means, and how what it's doing for us, right? And
Mhm.
I guess I always have a little bit of a distant perspective because I've been an outsider in places where I've lived all my life. So I'm an American citizen and I'm an Austinite, but I've also lived in India and Taiwan and Hong Kong and then also I think one of the other things for me is a historical perspective, which is the historian's view of things. And we get really, and all of us, and I do as well, get into the day-to-day minutia and the tit for tat and all of that we can get embroiled in. But what's a perspective that we can get from maybe 500 feet or 1,000 feet? And what emerged for me and is that, okay, let's, it started with the election itself, right? It was this election happened, and we all not only were anticipating a result, we were all thinking a certain result was going to happen, and then the democratic process revealed to, I think, everybody, including Trump supporters, Hillary supporters, and and analysts, it revealed something entirely new that we thought we knew about where we are, who we are. That was not the case. And as time has gone by, I think what's been fascinating to me is that there's three perspectives. If we say, regardless of our support or opposition to Trump, and I'm very clear that I'm not a Trump supporter, what is this reflecting back to us? What is it showing to us? And so what emerged for me were three levels of that conversation. The first level would be simply by, if as I said in the article, I thought the election for me was men behaving badly and the women who enabled them. And that really spoke to Hillary as well as to Trump. I mean, but the difference was that Bill Clinton sort of, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize, I shouldn't have done that. Well, I'm not. Whereas Trump said, no, I grab him by the right. And so in doing that, he because of his personality and because of acknowledging things that a lot of the times have been done with wink, wink, nod, nod, and we know what we mean, right? Dog whistles, sort of the bullhorn. I think it forced a lot of people to confront things that they were just not okay with, and not just the people that were afflicted, like women or Black people, but just everybody else going, you know what, we really have to look at that. And so it galvanized the Me Too movement. It galvanized Black Lives Matter. Both of these things existed before Trump, but it got people to really show up. And then in doing that, the second sort of area where it caused, and just one more thing on that, which is I think that, in psychology, they talk about you can't really make progress on your issues if you don't talk about them. Verbalizing and articulating to yourself, to somebody else, about what you're dealing with, what you went through in your childhood, that kind of thing, is actually the first step in healing yourself and moving past psychological issues. So if we think of America as having deep-rooted psychological issues and a being on its own journey of which we are part, then two of its original sins were the not letting women participate in the process, and of course slavery, and those two things have been not really adequately fully dealt with. I mean, we've dealt with them in pieces and pieces here and there, but we did have the 100-year anniversary of women getting the vote last week, which was amazing. But there's, but that didn't also get African-American women didn't get the vote. And what did that really mean? And so we've had these two issues, and by actually talking about them and then the disaffected populations actually finding their voice. I mean, women had a massive march, through right after he was inaugurated. And so that to me, and I kind of noticed, as a new citizen, I mean, I came to the country in 91. I became I went through the entire process of the journey of having a student visa and then a work visa and a green card, and then finally getting my citizenship. It took 14 years. And as someone who is a, had grown up, like when I was in Taiwan, it was a military dictatorship. And I was a kid. I was in fourth and fifth grade, but you could feel the power of that. Just what that did when a country was dominated by people by the military and soldiers holding guns. It was a very strange thing. And right after we left was when Chiang Ching-kuo, the then dictator of Taiwan, said, "No, we're going to open up the country, and after my death, there's no third follower, third dictator." And you saw Taiwan start to open up and become a free society. So I've had that experience of also seeing, what it is like to be in certain situations that I think, for example, a lot of Americans don't have that. You've always grown in a place where you can speak your mind and you can fight for whoever you want to and all that kind of stuff. So that to me was really interesting in terms of it really allowed, or not allowed, but it prodded people to really say things, about problems that they face. Women having been abused and mistreated by, and not just the Weinsteins of the world, but just in general, and workplace, issues and things like that. But that it's finally like we have to really speak out about this. And I think it's because he was able to speak out so directly and say, yeah, so what, that we went, actually, no, we have to actually say something about this. So that's one broad set of issues that I think he instigated, again, and not because he's trying to help us on our journey. It's just the nature of who this person is. The second area would be, what I noticed in terms of, complacency, both in participating and voting, but also in running for office, that people are not, we still don't have balance of women in representation in our leadership. I mean, we obviously didn't achieve the first, female president. And we've got a long way to go. And then we saw that reaction in the 2018 midterms, where we had the largest number of, turnout, first of all, participation just as voters in 100 years. And then we had new candidates, people that were running who said, oh, this is actually my democracy. So the thing to me about, the part of that journey is the Franklin quote, when they left the convention, the Constitutional Convention, and he was asked apocryphally, what have you given us, Mr. Franklin? He said, a republic, if you can keep it. And it's us. We have to participate in democracy. A monarchy is one in which citizens don't participate. You're subjects, right? And you just sit there and the king says what they do, or maybe the king and the nobility, and then you just take it. I mean, that's your job, is to just accept what's being handed down. A democracy is not that. A democracy is where everybody needs to show up. And that's it. That's sort of the secondary thing, which is like participation in the democratic process, whether as a voter and having your voice be heard, but secondarily as a candidate and as someone who can actually assume positions of leadership. Those things have been instigated in incredibly good ways. And they've gotten people to realize, if I don't show up, if I don't participate, if I don't run and lead, then we're going to get what we get, So that's sort of the second issue. And then the third issue is just a more long-term march of the democratic process. So, I don't agree that democracy is fragile. But I think that democracy has to be stewarded, because democracy is something that America, invented over about a 30-year period from 1776 to 1803. And they really perfected or created a method by which rights could be fought for and gotten. And that process, they didn't give us all the rights, but they gave us a way for everybody to participate in that democratic method. But that method isn't perfect. It wasn't born perfect. It had a massive flaws. The first version, the first attempt at that method was the Articles of Confederation, which totally failed after 10 years, because they'd actually gotten rid of the king. It turns out the Declaration is so anti-king that they went, oh, we don't need the king. And this whole notion of throwing out the executive with the monarchical bathwater, this idea that, oh, actually you need this executive role. So then they brought back the executive in the form of the presidency, because there is some power to that. Even in British parliamentary systems, or in the parliamentary system, you have the prime minister. So there is an executive function that's very important, but they didn't solve all the problems in that. And so when Trump, for example, didn't release his tax returns, there was no legal reason for him to do so. I mean, just one example, right? Not to mention all the other things that he's done. And the only way in the legal system, as well as constitutionally, that you get improvements to the democratic method is when they're tested, when actually somebody goes up and tests them. And in that way, Nixon, for example, failed. He resigned without testing it. So we all went, okay, cool, but we didn't actually go through the legal process to actually say, what is that and how should we fix that? And so in that sense, Trump has also exposed a number of problems in this particular aspect, which has always been problematic with the democratic method, this executive branch, the presidency, which ties back to the monarchy. We've always had issues with bringing and hemming that in. If you look at the other branches, they work really very well. I mean, John Marshall really, got us the Supreme Court and executed that in a really good way. The legislative process is really well developed, and there's all kinds of battles that go on there. But they've got good structures. The presidency is one of those where, why is the president allowed to hire their family members? When I first came to the States, I thought, why is Hillary Clinton running healthcare? And then going back, why is JFK's brother now? To me, it just seemed really weird, and it does today too. We just see it, how weird it looks when you have the entire family up there getting, on the presidential bill. So these issues are constitutional issues that have to be brought up by testing the actual system. And so again, in that way, assuming we're able to get past this moment and actually look at those issues and really fix those issues, then we're afforded another chance to improve the democratic method, such as it is. And again, in these three ways, we have a lot to be thankful for. Now, I'm expecting this to be kind of the first of a series of articles that I'm going to discuss some of the other issues. But I thought, just in terms of the first one, was just to articulate from the democratic process participation issues that are important, and then the constitutional issues. These are sort of three ways that Trump has, by his presence and his inadvertent nature, who he is, he has given us a reflection that we need and have needed, perhaps.
I think it's a really good point. And I think that where democracy is concerned, there's a real problem because we don't have a shared perception of what we mean when we say democracy. Different people assume different things. Mm-hmm. But at least there has been what I've always referred to as the democratic intention, the idea that a democracy is what we want, even though it's very imperfect. We're not really a true democracy. People are excluded. All of these things are true, but we have the intention to make that work. I think one of the differences that we have with Trump and his administration is that he doesn't really have the democratic intention. He doesn't care about having a democracy. And what he wants is, power, absolute power. And I think sometimes I think that he must have viewed the presidency that way before he took office, and he's just doing what he thinks the president is supposed to do.
Well, and if you look at it,
smarter than that, I don't know, and he might have realized.
Well, if you look at companies are dictatorships, right? So what's interesting, and again, this is sort of this whole idea of business and how business works and entrepreneurship and then that whole aspect entering into the political sphere, right? And so the problem with businesses is founders or CEOs, I mean, they are subject to boards later on and things like that, but they have this sort of they really run things, and they can hire and fire and things like that. So that mindset has been brought into this realm, right?
Right. But and the reason that we tend to, some of us tend to favor cooperatives is the business culture where businesses are in effect dictatorships is not reflective of that democratic intention that I mentioned. But a cooperative is really about that. Co-ops that's one of the big challenges for them is attempting to have a democratic workplace.
You mentioned President Nixon, and he was one of the early examples of exactly what Trump is playing now. He's actually pulled the old Nixon playbook out: law and order, everybody who disagrees is unpatriotic. They're trying to tear down the Constitution or whatever he's defending at the moment. And that was one of the first instances where the previous presidents, sure, they were doing, evil deals behind the scenes, but publicly they still tried to play the game according to some sort of, good old boy rules, I guess. But Trump and Nixon were both ones that just said, to hell with it. Yeah, I'm just going to be the supreme leader. And we got rid of one, but Trump seems to have a whole new playbook going.
Yeah, but that's the test, right? That's actually, so the whole thing with the human, I mean, we rewind us back and we're monkeys running around in the forest, right? And 200,000 years of hunter gatherers and small tribes of 200 people. So this recent era of human history, if we take a really big historical perspective, is very recent, right? And then this idea of democracy and democratic participation is even more recent. I mean, it's just a few hundred years old, right? So in that sense, I mean, we still have that primal brain. And I think that's what's so interesting, is that despite all the work I do to become a more caring person, a more empathetic person, I still have that aggression. I still have those things that happen. I get irritated, and evolution couldn't get rid of that primal brain that's still there. And that primal monkey brain is still the one that says, I have a leader and I'm going to follow that leader, right? And you can't, if we are to perfect, if you like, democracy, we can't pretend that isn't there. We have to acknowledge that's a very real part of human behavior and human nature. And we have to build a system on that, right? The system can't be built on people participating and believing in it. It has to work based on the fact that it takes the worst of human impulses and it catalyzes them in a productive way. That's sort of the big insight, if we just want to compare that to capitalism, right? And entrepreneurship. Before, you just take stuff from people. I see what you have, I'll just grab it from you. And then what capitalism and entrepreneurship does is it says, no, I'm going to create something of value to you. And if I serve you and you and you and you, then I will benefit by making a lot of money. So it takes that same selfish human impulse of selfishness and greed, and it turns it and makes it productive. Now, is it perfect? Does it cause problems? Of course, all of the things that we know are associated with capitalism and greed and so on and so forth that we would like to fix. But the key insight that it did was that before that, we knew we had these selfish impulses. We knew we have these aggressive impulses, and we didn't know how to turn them into something productive. And so to me, in the democratic process, or in the perfection of the improvement of the democratic method, we have to account for the worst instincts, right? So in a way, we have to be thankful to Nixon because he exposed some parts of it. But then we have to be even more thankful to Trump because this is the situation in which this whole thing has to get tested. I mean, the interesting part to me, even in the last 3 years, and we have this event coming up to see what happens, but a lot of what we've seen is actually the democratic process hemming and curtailing, right? And actually stepping up. There's a lot of, the Republican Party has gone to sleep. You've got these people in the administration who have aided and abetted in this process. But at the same time, the process, people were expecting the Supreme Court to just do a complete, destruction of liberal points of view. And yet we had a number of wins in the Supreme Court, despite a conservative, right, majority. So that's what I think is, because the thing that's hard for us when we have a point of view, right? In essence, I think we're all dictators. We are all little dictators. Like, I am right about this issue, you're wrong, right? And we all have this sort of superior idea that, like, I have a position on guns. I think having guns is this guns running around, the numbers that we have are it's really silly. I mean, it's just, why do we have so many deaths? Because we have so many guns. But I also realize the issue of guns is a very emotional issue. And in my participation of democracy, I have to allow for my fellow citizens to come over here at some point and realize that in the meantime, I have to live with our collective decision that everybody should have an AK-47, right? So this is the tough part about this whole thing. I mean, it's bringing up our own issues around, we want our position to be the right one or the one that everybody else follows. But that's by definition a dictatorship in which whatever Trump's doing is attempting that. But then we all will be living inside of dictatorships.
most people have an image of themselves in normal times of being a normal, evolved person. But when disaster or hardship approaches, we suddenly become just nothing more than monkeys with pants. It's just,
Yes.
The veneer has been removed and the animal face really it comes out, and that's what we're seeing in a lot of the nation around. People who used to be cordial to each other.
Yes.
How are
Yes.
you? Have a nice day.
Yes.
Now it's like, screw you and leave me alone. It's my 6 inches of territory and stay away. And
Mhm.
you are seeing that more and more. And it's basically just that animal brain that we've never quite gotten rid of.
Absolutely. And we have to, we have to acknowledge this within ourselves. I mean, we have to actually, because again, back to, if you don't acknowledge something, then it will control you, and you'll call it fate or destiny. I think is the Carl Jung quote. Really mangled, but but I mean, part of what you have to acknowledge is, I have sexual urges, I have aggression, I have all these things, and I have to acknowledge, how do I productively do that? Like I used to. This is slightly tangential, but maybe not. I used to, sort of decry Las Vegas. I just found Vegas to be the most vacuous and silly, dumb place I could possibly imagine. And I'd go every now and then, a bachelor party or some event would happen. Oh gosh, I gotta go. I go to Vegas, and about a day and a half at max for me was like, oh, get me the hell out of here. And then the last trip I made to Vegas, I ended up at this art exhibit, and it's called ACOB. It's a James Turrell piece that's, funnily enough, on top of the Louis Vuitton store on the main drag at City Staples Center. And you walk up to this thing, and it's literally just a two-piece chamber, and you walk in there, and you're supposed to spend about 15 minutes, and after about 15 minutes you're totally discombobulated, like you have no idea where you are, right? And I walked out of that and I said, oh my gosh, I just saw Vegas for the first time. I actually see what Vegas is doing. It's saying, you got this primal brain, come on over, give it a total workout. Like, come here for 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, party, all the things you can imagine, the cocaine, the lady, I mean, whatever it is, right? Just to your heart's content. And you will exhaust that primal brain. At some point you will say, get me the heck out of here. I got to go back to my normal life, right? Until the next time when that builds up. And so I grew to appreciate Vegas in a way that it sort of said, hey, this is a place where the primal brain can have a party, in a hopefully safe way, and hopefully, all of that. But then you got that out, and now you can come back and like return to your normal life, right? So in that sense, that's a very advanced way of dealing with the primal brain. Religion has always dealt with the primal brain by saying it's a sin and it's wrong, and you should not be doing it, and penance and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't really work, because you can tell from the people that, especially conservative folks, who adhere to or supposed to or want to adhere to these strict rules of sexual mores and behavior. Liberty University, right? I mean, they can't help themselves, because and they're the sort of biggest breakers of their own rules, because that is not going to solve it. Like, just pretending it doesn't exist and stamping it away doesn't solve it. It just makes it worse.
Things like Vegas are basically taking the playbook from the old Roman Empire, bread and circuses. Only
Yes.
it's just it's an electrified coliseum for the masses.
And in one in which the gladiators aren't murdered. I mean, that's the other,
Well,
the
not in
slight
public
detail of
anyway.
the
The
card.
mob takes care of that after the fact out in the desert.
Yeah, that's off stage.
It reminds me of The Purge. You just get a night to kill people or go crazy and do all the drugs you want. I've only been to Vegas once. I did not care for it. I stayed in the room the whole night. I didn't gamble. I'm not a gambler. I have really bad luck.
I always thought
There,
they should have a decontamination chamber like they do at at a radiation accident where you have to be
Silkwood.
Yeah, it's like before you get on the plane to go home, you go through the decontamination procedure, because I felt that way. I would get away from Vegas or Tahoe. It's like, oh Lord, not only am I broke, I'm dirty.
Yes, yes. I mean, the interesting thing, so I don't know if you've seen some of the research with David Pinker and his whole thing about the decline of violence, for example. According depending on how you look at it and things like that, we're getting less and less violent as a species, right? But back in the day, violence was a very important thing because we had to protect from animals and we had to get aggression and testosterone. So there's still a number of people in the society that still get those violence. They get more testosterone, they get a bigger amygdala, whatever it is, and they have those things that we're still waiting on. I mean, in other words, the whole thing can't advance. I mean, one of the metaphors that I didn't talk about in the article is society is like a train, and liberals are in the front of the train going, let's go, let's give more rights to everybody and let's move forward. And the back of the train is the conservative, which is like, I'm not ready for this change. I can't do this yet. Hold on, right? And dictatorships don't care about the train staying together, right? A dictatorship just imposes its will. And even a benevolent dictatorship, let's say the Shah of Iran, he, for example, banned purdah, right? He banned the facial coverings. He wanted to have a modern nation, and he banned this women from actually walking in public with coverings. Now, the unintended consequence of that was there were so many women that were so taken aback by this. What's the word? I mean, hurt by this, that they went to and became supporters of the Shah of Ayatollah Khomeini, right? Creating the Islamic Revolution in '79. That women were some of the biggest supporters of the Islamic Revolution, and you think to yourself, well, that's weird. I mean, why would you not want the freedom? Well, because socialization and so on and so forth, and whatever mores they have, this ripping away of the purdah in an effort to modernize actually got them to created a major backlash, right? So the thing that the democratic method does is it doesn't let the train, there's that other famous one, the snake with the 13 cuts, right? But the democratic method doesn't allow us to move too fast beyond where we are and ready as a society, because we have to have the back of the train catch up. And so that's the other part of this, which is a lot of sort of patience, in the sense that if you've come to a point of view that's sort of more evolved or more that encompasses more things, you're kind of waiting on other people to catch up, right? And they're going to catch up at their own time, which is also what makes it really, really difficult and frustrating.
Well, I think that with so many women, that's really compelling about the backlash of the women supporting the Ayatollah. But I see a similar situation here in the United States, where people will go like, why are these women supporting people, these men who obviously, don't want them to have equality or whatever? And it's like, well, because they've been socialized to, hey, I know though where my position is. I
That's
get
right.
to be the wife on the pedestal. I get that job, and you're not going to take that away from me. So I'm going to fight tooth and nail. And it feels that way, not catching up yet as we're evolving along. And I just wanted to add one other thing that I've been thinking of as you're talking. I think it's interesting too. I've been following the work of a journalist, B. Schofield, who's been uncovering all of these religious communities, like pulling off the Band-Aid and showing them for what they are. And she just recently did one on Kundalini organization and Yogi Bhajan, and it's like all of this is coming to light at the same time. At the very same time all this Trump stuff is going on, it's like somebody's really lifted up the rug, because we had so much dust under there. It was like a giant elephant, excuse the pun. And I was really intrigued by your article, because that's what I've been feeling too. It's like I'm trying to see, like, this is helping us because we've become so complacent, but now I'm seeing people I never would have expected getting passionate about the democratic process in the local races, like the micro local, city, their little hamlets or city council, and like they forgot. And that's how all these people came to power, because they're like, well, nobody's paying attention, so we'll run, we'll win, and we can have them do what we want. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, that's exactly right. And that's what is so interesting, is that you when I went back and I compiled a movie list or documentary list of sort of the women's movement, right? The from Elizabeth Cady Stanton in 1848 and Seneca Falls, and then all the whole. I mean, it was not until the third generation of women leading this movement that Elizabeth Cady and Susan B had already passed away before women finally got the right to vote, or at least white women got the right to vote. And the biggest frustration that Elizabeth Cady and Susan B had was all the other women that didn't want the right to vote. Right? They had massive opposition from women who didn't want the right to vote. And sort of this postmodern. So to me, the kind of like we're getting a little bit ahead of my little article journey that I'm having in my head, but where we really are, to me, if I want to fast forward a little bit, is we have a crisis of meaning, right? What's in the postmodern world, in the world where, back to your point about I know my place, I have my role, I know what I'm supposed to do, I'm socialized to do that, and I follow these things, and everything is actually very, very nice. There's a certain niceness about it because I don't have to think about all these things. Whereas if I come to my relationship and we have to negotiate every single thing, and do you do the dishes, and what should we do here? That is actually a lot of work for the individual and for that particular couple, right? And so the work of that, and especially if you don't have the tools to do that work, then you get very, very put off and very daunted, and you just don't want to, and you want to retreat back to the surety that you get from a guru. And so this is another kind of set of lists. It's that list is called "Consider Me Gone," of all the cults that we have.
Mm-hmm.
The Indian guru, of course, is the most awesome cult leader. The best purveyor of that, because India is so full of gurus. But the idea that people are seeking meaning. Mm-hmm. And they don't know, because those old things are actually not working. Like if you look at the Christian movement and who Jesus is and what they are, they're not anywhere close, right? So they don't really understand. Like Jesus was a socialist, if you want to,
yeah,
right? So it's not because of that, because they just want a system of belief. And actually, what's really interesting about Trump, again, to bring it back to that, is it's actually the crisis of belief in Christianity. Right, the authoritarian system of Christianity, which is a state religion, right? Modern Christianity was a state religion started by Constantine in 300 AD, right? So he wanted control over the population. So an authoritarian meaning system is actually not working for people, and so then they have to be, but they can't say that. They can't explicitly say, I don't want to go to church or whatever it is. So then they find these figures like a Trump who says, oh yeah, the Christian thing, but really just follow me, and I'll give you a replacement system of meaning, right? Mm-hmm. So whether in Austin, where we have our very benign or hopefully benign gurus and cults, right? We've had a couple of cults in Austin, of which there's a couple of documentaries on that list. But our cults tend to be more like, oh, we're trying to go and achieve enlightenment or whatever that is, and yoga and that kind of thing. But there's still control systems. There's still, people get this great feeling of like, I belong to this community. And what they're trying to do is go back to that community of 200 that we used to live in for 200,000 years, where there was a leadership, there was a way, we all followed the way, we all knew each other, the same people over the year. So that's what people are longing for, right? So that's they're trying to get that, but in the presence of systems of meaning that are actually done. They're actually done with them. They just don't realize they're done with them.
Yes, and also I feel that I was thinking about just last night how that search for meaning, I was seeing that in all the gun-toting militia type, like they mm-hmm. feel they're protecting, there's this crisis, like you said, crisis of meaning in this country, like wanting that belonging. And that's how I'm seeing it now.
Every hero has its journey.
Absolutely. There's this yearning because it's just been, there's just nothing to fight for. There's nothing to, so it's like, here's something I can believe in. Here's a known, here's a given.
Yeah.
And I see it in everything, whether you're taking part in the Black Lives Matters protests or anything, just this passion, just like, finally, I have something I can believe in. And so that has me feeling, not an excusing, but a compassion, because I feel this yearning that all of us Americans are feeling right now. So,
well, I joined a cult when I was very young. It had costume, special headgear, and I learned all the sacred songs. Then someone told me that Mickey Mouse was just a cartoon. And of course, there went my ego there. But I grew up in a very conservative, very conservative environment. And so my input was pretty limited until I got to a certain age when I was paying attention in school. And when I went off to college, I went through what was basically postpartum trauma. It's like coming out of the womb. It's like, wait, who are all these people? What are they talking about? And people from the same environment tended to go sometimes two different ways. One would be progressive. The other one would say, I can't let go of all of this. And I think that's where a lot of these people that will not, walk away from the Trump train, they had that postpartum trauma and could not change. And some people do. So that's where we end up with this schism in the country.
Yeah, and that's, you got the baby boomers that have sort of were sold a bill of goods. They were sold the capitalist story of the American dream, the idea that all that mattered was making money and all this kind of stuff. And then they're getting old and they're realizing, well, I get to die now. Like death is coming, right? And who no one told me that. I'm getting, life moves. And I think there's a real frustration there. And I think that's, so again, these are things I want to talk about in future articles and with you guys too. But one of the things, you think about the great American tragedies, right? You have Captain Ahab, you have The Great Gatsby, and you have Scarlett O'Hara, right? There's more, but just let's take those three. And what is the tragedy of Captain Ahab? He mistakes an internal struggle with an external one, right? We all have to come to an accommodation with this thing called life and the existential crisis of meaning. And what do we do with our lives? And the fact that it's unfair, all the realities of life, we have to come to some equanimity, as Melville said about, and that's why he wrote about this character. But instead of dealing with it internally as an internal struggle, we try to wage that battle on other houses or other realms, right? So the political realm, which is super dominant, is one place where people are using to fight out and work out their meaning. Or in Ahab's case, he wants to rail against nature itself. Moby Dick as nature itself. He's mad at the universe for being the way it is, when the universe is the way it is. You can't change the universe, right? And so we're waging this battle of meaning on the wrong plane, right? There's one of the great Indian, perhaps one of the greatest pieces of Indian literature. It's the Bhagavad Gita. It's a dialogue between a warrior and his guru, Lord Krishna, on a battlefield. And this conversation happens right as these two armies are about to have the greatest battle of all time. And Arjuna, the warrior, loses his mind. He's like, I can't do this. And he throws his weapons down. And Krishna then engages him. He says, you think you're in this battle out here, but you're really in a battle in here. And that's what you've got to go do work on, not this battle out here. In the end, Arjuna picks up his weapons and does the battle. But it's very difficult when we don't have the tools and we don't know where we're supposed to wage the battle. And humans love their golden hammers, right? We're like, maybe this politics thing will give me meaning, right? Maybe this political movement, maybe this thing externally will give me meaning, when in fact, none of those things ever will. No guru can ever give you meaning. No system of thought can ever give you meaning. No external source, because we have to deal with it internally. But the challenge is that we are only beginning to really reckon with meaning now in the 20th and late 20th, early 21st century. We're really just beginning to go, oh, wait, this meaning thing is this thing I've got to go work out. And so we're using the other domains, like, and especially politics, where people are really trying to work out their meaning, but they're doing it in these political, movements, right?
And I also think too about that this nation is in its adolescence. It unlike so many other, ancient cultures, India, China, we're little kids. And, that whole idea of the teenager is such a recent construct, and it's very American, this like, well, you just, you don't have to think about these things, it's just this play, the world is your oyster and playground, blah, blah. Anyway, so that's not surprising either. We're just little kids basically, and we haven't tried these things out yet. We don't have this sort of wisdom. I mean, that's how I look at it anyway. So
I think you're right, and I think that's again. I think that it's the precocious kid, right? America is the
that's
precocious
the
kid
word. Mm-hmm.
in the human story. America has done all these amazing things with capitalism, which it's one of the biggest proponents and practitioners of democracy. America kind of gave the world democracy when they were still stuck with the whole king model. And so America is this precocious kid, but that doesn't mean psychologically it's developed, right? Like for a long time I thought, man, these kids are so smart these days, and it is true that kids are very smart. Like I wasn't this smart as the young kids that I interact with, but they're not smart in the sense that they know a lot of words, but they don't know what they mean. Um, and sort of like that's what modern kids are. They're empty in the sense that they know how to talk about these. They're exposed to so many things, but they don't have this depth of experience, right? And like, how many Americans have left the country? How many Americans have lived under so-called socialism and actually understood what it means? How many Americans have experienced dictatorship, right? So Americans are the beneficiaries of this precocious journey, without having maybe a deep enough understanding for how special it is, how precious it is. And also the other lacking things, right? The cool thing, the reason I love going to Asia or to Europe is just you walk down those cobblestones, and you're encountering thousands of years of humans trying to work out
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? And we don't have that here. We can't go that far.
And I think we too, unless you're Native American or African American, we don't have any sense of the trauma of wars, of bombings, of centuries of being overrun or overrunning others. There's just not that sort of memory of that at all. Like, so that's why when of course it's super difficult with COVID and the lockdowns and everything that's going on, but like this is what the rest of the world in different ways has had to deal with over centuries and centuries. This is new to us. So that's, I think, why it's even more shocking. If we had some of this kind of experience, so to speak, under our belts, it would be a lot more resilient. It just feels that way. So
some Americans haven't felt that hobnail boot on the back of their neck as someone else is telling them how they should be. And, we're just seeing a lot of that, finally, come to fruition of the people with the boot on their neck saying, this isn't right. I need to get rid of the foot in that boot and do something different. And we're seeing a lot of change, but there's still a lot of people who really long for that old hobnail boot and the old regime that used to tell everyone that they weren't worthy and that they should listen to the white guy in Washington.
Yeah, and that's the other shift. But I think what's interesting is all of these are very positive things. Like if you think about America demographically is moving away from a white dominated population to a more diverse population, right? And the American male, the white male, is the one who has had this dominant position in society. And all of this is also a reaction to that situation, that actually the society is becoming more equal. Everybody has to fight for whatever raise they've got to get. They've got to participate just like everybody else. And if you had a privilege where you walk around as being just the person that everybody bows and kowtows to, and now all of a sudden you have to do it just like everybody else, for you that's a relative shift, right? That's a relative downshift from your original position. So I think there's again that part of it that's also being psychologically worked out, and that's why this last hurrah, if you like, of this kind of animus and just do as I say. I dominate. I'm all of that is in essence a kind of Hail Mary pass at doing that. While this thing has already shifted, the ground has already shifted and moved. And so that's you. It's like your psychological model hasn't caught up to your reality, right? And that's the other piece of this. That's really, if one has empathy, or one can try to have empathy for the situation, it's it's actually people are in a very tough position. Like I can't imagine the state of grace and happiness that most of these folks experience. Like getting on there and putting the vitriol out on your social media and then just participate. Like your experience of life sucks. I mean, and what are you mad about? Like your life is incredibly good relative to 99% of humanity alive today and 99.9% of humanity that ever lived, right? So there's a lack of sort of historical and comparative context. And that's something I always felt like whenever I first came to the States, that Americans are just these open-hearted people, but they're also naive, right? And that's the precocious part. They're like, well, this is how it is. And like, well, you know that there's been other ways that people have run their societies for thousands of years, right? So there's that too, which is maybe America needs to, maybe the democratic process doesn't heal itself. And we go through a period of actual dictatorship, and then people realize, oh, that's actually what this is. Oh, wow. You know,
No.
that's not something in a history book. I mean, I hope that isn't what we have to face.
Oh,
But, you know,
that I know.
Well, I, I'm a little concerned about that, actually, that if we keep moving in that direction, then we have essentially an explosion, which is destructive. And in the end, hopefully, we come out okay, but we go through some very painful, some very difficult turmoil, really. Um, and I'm thinking specifically about this next election, because regardless who wins, there's going to be people out in the streets and they're going to be mad. They're going to be very angry.
yeah, but I think the kind of leadership and the kind of way that we want to have this dialogue, you know, it's sort of like, you know, like Susie, you were like, I couldn't even stand half a day of Vegas. And for me, it's like a day and a half. It's sort of interesting. And then for somebody else, it's 5 days or 2 weeks, and then they're out.
Right.
Right. So I think it's sort of an addiction. I mean, addiction metaphors here are also good. I mean, you know, that what is the limit? There is a point at which somebody realizes, and I've dealt with people in my life who've had addiction or things like that, and you realize they have to go deal and just live in that addiction, right? Like you know, at some point you don't have a choice but for them to experience it directly. I mean, COVID is a very fascinating thing. It's like, I didn't believe it was true, and then I lost my parent, and now it's true. Don't go out partying. I mean, okay, so you don't know how to think about something that's not your personal experience and then change your behavior accordingly, right? So we have this problem of that, but it really matters, I think, whether people are going to stoke those flames or pacify those flames. And so the problem you have is fundamentally of a person whose self-interest is to stoke the flames. But if you have another person, like if you look at Biden or Harris, the Biden-Harris team, they're not doing that. They're saying, hey, we need to come together, right? So that will be very different. I mean, it's not that people haven't lost elections and then gone, okay, you know, it's I lose. So I think people's propensity to actually go and take a gun and shoot somebody and go into war, like none of us have really experienced that, and we're so far away from that in reality that even the idealization of it when it comes to even close reality is going to be really brutal. And take those. Did you guys ever see that that 30-minute Vice documentary about the Charlottesville, the ball guy that was running the Charlottesville protest, that whole episode?
I saw
Like,
his YouTube when he was crying at the end, like the
yes.
before and after. Yeah, he was like, "Oh, we're gonna go," and he comes, "They're gonna come and get me." Yeah, that was awesome.
And it was just that close, right? I mean, it's somebody who's actually experienced a lot of pain, a lot of problems and trauma in childhood that wants to get this aggression out. But then when actually confronted, it's a paper tiger. Like when you actually confront it, they really just want to. I mean, you know.
Well, there's a certain part of the population that lives for that confrontation. I live in the area of the Jade Helm folks who showed up for imaginary governmental conspiracies. I see on the streets military styled vehicles, guys with tons of Trump stickers and NRA stickers, and they actually are driving a converted pickup or Humvee
Humvee.
that looks like it's ready to go to war, and these people act like they really are ready to go to the war, and there are a lot of them around, so you can't ever discount those kind of people. They don't really
No.
Have a core belief. They just enjoy going out and playing soldier, and a lot of them
But it's cosplay,
never
right?
were.
Exactly.
Cosplay
It's
is
cosplay.
that, yeah,
It's,
yeah.
but
And they played
cosplay-
lots and lots of video games. I mean,
So that 17-year-old who killed those people that was some serious cosplay.
that's
Those are the
cosplay
people I'm
with
concerned
loaded
about.
weapons.
I think that there are a large majority of those people who will go out with guns, and I think I am afraid of that, quite honestly. I really do think that there are a lot of rednecks who aren't even registered guns, which is who commits the most crimes are unregistered guns. So I am afraid of that, honestly. I think a lot of us have said, none of this is going to happen. Ever since Trump started running, none of this is going to happen. Oh, well, he's not going to get away with that. I don't know. I think we're in trouble.
Oh yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's the reason that I think that there's a set of people that are on the left of this conversation, and all of us included, I'm sure, who are just appalled from day one and have been living in an ongoing nightmare. But I think in order for us to move forward, we have to be able to address not the people on the other side who are diehards. They're going to take their time or never evolve and do what they do. But we really do have to address the folks that are, hey, this is an existential kind of threat here. You should take this seriously. And even your positions are supported, but the way we're going about this and this particular person is not the right person for it to follow any real positions you have, right? So I think we've got to be able to appeal to a set of people and peel off those sets of people who might have conservative or points of view, but also say, hey, listen, like, this is not about this left-right thing. This is about something more fundamental to who are we as a people? Who do we want to be? Do we want to go back to a civil war or fall into that kind of thing? And hopefully bring enough of those people over into the conversation that we don't have 4 more years of a nightmare,
Well, and I've seen for quite a long time, like work I do, like how I'm not sure what that work is, but sort of straddling a chasm. And over on this side is Pleasantville. That's the Trump side, and then there's this new way. And the people on the edge, seeing that maybe there's another way, those are the people to help over, to try to yeah.
Exactly. It's a back to the train metaphor. Like, it's not just the end of the train. Like somewhere in the middle, we can get some people over here, and then we're moving in a direction. I mean, and the number of Republican folks who have come out against Trump and all of that we've seen. I mean, those are positive indications that this is not the way that we want to go about it. I think the one other thing that I'll mention, which I think is interesting, which I'm going to try to address in my next article on this series that I'm thinking of as a series now, is sort of the capitalism bug, right? So that this belief in capitalism to all, despite the reality on the ground. Like, America is not successful only because of capitalism. America is successful because of a crazy amount of work government has done. Like, Silicon Valley would not exist without the American government spending billions of dollars. So we have a false conception of capitalism, and that means there's a blind spot around someone who's not even a successful capitalist, but can tell you that they were successful, and then people fall into that trap. So there's also that part of it, which is a real bug or defect in the American psyche around, on the one hand, this absolutely valid system that has given us wealth and material, success, but on the other hand, the overreach of that system and believing it can solve all problems, that's the other piece of that.
So we are at the end of the road, or the end of the road map. The end of
Nighty
the
night, everyone.
episode.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Join us
Bijoy,
again.
we'll be looking for the next in the series, and we do hope you'll come back.
I look
soon.
forward to it. I always enjoy it. It's so great to talk to you all.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.